Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing the poetry that I read this last completed week, and we have some very exciting news because I was also able to complete one of my big 2025 goals. So we're going to be discussing the 3 volumes that I read, what I thought about them, and we have had some big successes, so I'm very excited to talk about these. And we're also going to be talking about my 2025 goal that I accomplished thanks to one of my viewers here on YouTube. So we're going to go through these poetry volumes in the order that I read them because that makes more sense and kind of completes a story of what's been happening. So I have been trying to read a couple poetry volumes every single week in an attempt to accomplish one of my 2025 goals. I wanted to find some poetry that I enjoyed reading. It didn't really matter how I found this poetry, but I felt like it was too broad of a, I don't know if genre is the right word, or a style, too broad of a style for me to dislike almost everything in it. But I was really struggling when faced with the large amount that was located in my library to find anything that I really enjoyed. So I kind of just avoided that section. And one of my 2025 goals was to find a poet or a poem that I enjoyed. And that was something that I set out to do. And in an attempt to accomplish it, probably somewhere around late summer, I started reading poetry volumes where I would go and just collect a couple from the shelves and read them and see what I thought. And quite frankly, I haven't really had a whole lot of success until this week. I had some that were maybe a little better than others, but nothing that really stood out in a big way. So when I started reading this week, I had The Wheel by Wendell, which is from a prior library haul that I didn't get to. This one I had just selected because it was thin, and I read it and I was actually feeling kind of positive. I wasn't familiar with Wendell or The Wheel. I would describe a lot of the poetry in this book as reflective on like the cycle of life of like birth and death, and then perhaps the potential for rebirth. I would almost describe it as like vague Buddhist overtones, but like not overtly, and I don't even know if that's how Wendell would describe this volume, but this one was acceptable. I read it. There were a couple that I took pictures of because when I find a poem I enjoy, I usually take a picture and add it to my extensive camera roll. And there was some in here that I thought was fine. I don't think it like grabbed my attention, but it was definitely better than a lot of what I had read before. So I was like, I feel positive. I wouldn't say that this checked off the goal of finding poetry I enjoyed. In fact, I didn't check that goal off, but I was like, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. I felt like I could visualize what was in this. I felt like it wasn't too sad while touching on deeper themes. And so I was feeling positive having finished this volume. So having finished this volume and not sure where to go next, I had read a comment on one of my previous poetry reviews from a user by the name of Confused Mars, who suggested that I try Mary Oliver. And I had to go to the library to return some books and to pick up some holds that I had placed. So I thought, well, I'll just see if Mary Oliver is in the collection. Didn't know anything about her. So I just went down to the poetry section and I grabbed 2 off the shelf. I didn't do any research. I just grabbed the first 2 that seemed like they were, I felt like these would give me a good idea of what I was working with. So the first one I read by Mary Oliver was Winter Hours, prose, poems, and poems. So this was not just poetry. And the second one was White Pine, which was poems and prose poems. And I started to read these a couple days ago, and these were fantastic. These both definitely checked, having read this one and then also looked up some of Mary Oliver's other poems online, I was like, this is what I'm looking for. This is the poet that I can get behind. This is poetry that I enjoy, and I think I've done it. And this is one of those moments where I am reminded that even though I don't make any money on this YouTube channel, I get like 40 views a video. If I get over 100 views in the first couple days, I'm like, look at me and my successful video. So there's nothing to this YouTube channel except for my own personal enjoyment of talking about books that I like. But it's moments like these when a viewer can provide direction for a goal that I'm working towards, or a book suggestion that I take on and that I read it and that I enjoy it, and then it has in turn helped me check off one of my 2025 bucket list goals. Really makes me feel like all of it's worth it, basically. It makes me feel like, yes, this is a good idea. I should keep filming videos, even though I don't know if most people do not care if I keep filming videos, but I do get something out of it, and there's a tangible, or there's a benefit that comes to me that extends beyond like views or flames. Hopefully there's no flames. Fame, clout, influence, money, whatever people are hoping to get from this. So having read Mary Oliver's Winter Hours, which I started, I think I started this actually on a lunch break at work. I was like, this is it. And I was also looking through some of her poetry online. The one that sealed the deal, and having read the poem, I went and checked it off my list for 2025, was the poem When Death Comes, which actually is not in either of these, but I do encourage you to go and look up that poetry. But I was able to check off this from my list because these were both fantastic. I had a lot of fun, and I just wanted to read a couple sections that I felt were very meaningful I pulled out from these books. Both of them are devoted to, as far as I can tell from her Wikipedia article, her partner of like 30 years, Molly Malone Cook. So she lived with her, and Mary Oliver has actually since passed away, but at this time she was still living in New England, and a lot of her poetry focuses on nature and the world around her, and I think that's evident in the titles, White Pine and Winter Hours. So let's go through a couple of these that I felt, or just a couple notes that I wanted to point out. So the first one is on page 25 of Winter Hours, where she says, "The poem in which the reader does not feel himself or herself a participant is a lecture, listened to from an uncomfortable chair in a stuffy room inside a building." And somehow that one line in this admittedly prose section of this book is more insightful than that entire book by Ferlinghetti that I read that was called Poetry as Insurgent Art, I think it was. It was the black and red cover of my last poetry review, if I remember. And I felt like, and I think that's a very apt description of what a lot of poetry feels like to me, like I'm being lectured at by the high and mighty who understand it. And I did not feel that in any of Mary Oliver's poems. And I felt like she was very insightful in her comment on that. So that's page 25 in this section. And then page 31, there's actually a connection in this one to a math book that I read. Page 31, she's talking about, so I'm just gonna read the first couple lines of this one. It's from this one called Moss. "Maybe the idea of the world as flat isn't a tribal memory or an archetypal memory, but something far older. A fox memory, a worm memory, a moss memory. Memory of leaping or crawling or shrugging rootlet by rootlet forward across the flatness of everything. To perceive of the earth as round needed something else, standing up, that hadn't happened yet." And it continues on. But it actually reminded me of Flatland by Edwin Abbott, who wrote a book about a creature that lives in a two-dimensional world, and when pulled out of a two-dimensional world and brought into a three-dimensional world is unable to comprehend it because it exists in a dimension that it can't comprehend, or he can't comprehend. But then when brought to a one-dimensional world, he thinks it's very silly that the people there can't imagine a two-dimensional world like the one that he inhabits. It has a lot of application in math, even though it was written in the late 1800s, I believe. Fantastic. Definitely check it out. I do have a review on my channel, but something about this poem had a connection to a math book that I read, which I thought was super cool. This one has a mix of poems and prose. This one has also poems and prose poems, but is much more poetry focused, I would say, and is also a little smaller than this one. The one I wanted to call out in here, I feel like Mary Oliver's approach towards life is very similar to mine, I will say. In this one, it's called May on page 5. She's talking about seeing a snake in the road. And she says, "I hope to see everything in this world before I die." And I feel like that is, if not a life motto, very, very close to it. And I feel like that energy and her excitement to engage in the natural world and to see every little thing in the natural world and to appreciate it is something that I resonate very, very closely with, to kind of enjoy the little bits of life that are meaningful and enjoyable, but also this desire to enjoy a lot of nature. And there's a lot so this one, let me see. This one, White Pine, happens, or was written, if I'm reading these dates correctly, before this one. And there's stuff or poems published in White Pine that you can see has like a chronological sequence to this one. So there is some connection between the two volumes, which I don't think I've ever found before in a poetry volume, so that was just something else that was new. So overall, and I feel like Wendell Berry kind of got the short end of the stick, because if I had read anything else that I didn't enjoy, this one would have been probably the highlight, because it was pretty good too. But these two really stole the show, and I actually do like Mary Oliver. I now do have to decide if I want to continue to read some poetry weekly. I might just back it down to maybe one volume, just so I can focus on other things I want to read now that I've kind of accomplished this goal. But also, I'm probably going to go back and get something else by Mary Oliver cover because I enjoyed these first two so much. So again, thank you so much to the viewer Confused Mars. I looked up the name before here and I'll put them in the comments if they would like, for the suggestion, because you were right on. This was very enjoyable. I did like it. It justified the existence of my 5 years on YouTube. It justified reading two great books, and I had a fantastic time reading poetry this week, which is something that I really didn't think I was going to say ever in my life. So I really had a great time, and I just wanted to share these with you. If you have any thoughts, comments, any other poetry that you enjoy, or would like to share anything on this video, please leave it in the comment section down below. I do get a little drip of dopamine in my brain whenever I see someone has left a comment, and I do have a lot of comments that I need to catch up on, and I'm going to do that probably this afternoon. I'm filming on my lunch break, so I need to do that when I get off work. But yes, I love getting those comments. I get a little drip of dopamine. The social media companies have done their job getting their little hooks in me, but I really do love the feedback and the commentary that I receive on reading. It is really what makes this entire YouTube channel worth it, and moments like this worth it. So please leave your thoughts and comments. I appreciate every single one of them. I really do. I do read them. I do take them into consideration, and I'm just having a fun time, and I'm having a great day, and I'm in a good mood. So I hope you have a great rest of your day as well. Thank you so much for watching.